Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Ignite. Hopefully everybody's enjoying, grabbing a lot of information. I know this has been, at least a fun conference for us so far. It's been pretty exciting. My name is Amesh Mansakani, and I am a senior program manager in the Office division at Microsoft, focused on enterprise deployments. So not just click to run, but also figuring out MSI, the new universal apps that we have available, and then things like the group policies and all that fun stuff that pertain to deployment. So today I'm going to be focusing on how to deploy Office 365 using System Center Configuration Manager. How many of you here are current admins using SCCM like 2012? Nice. Okay. Any a little older, 2007? A couple of you? Okay, cool. So what this session is really going to focus on is from a Office 365 perspective, what are the best practices for deploying as well as updating? As you're probably aware or familiar, Office today, Office 365 ProPlus, acts a little differently when it comes to the overall update management and deployment. And we'll talk through that. I know this was, for some reason, rated as a 200 level session. We're going to go a little deeper than that. And then there's other sessions that I'll recommend throughout the rest of the week that's going to go even deeper. And we'll cover some of the topics like the Office deployment tool, which I'll be talking about today, some of the configuration files. We'll be talking about just the overall update management, so we have sessions around that. And then, we have a couple of other ones, which I'll mention in a little bit. So let's actually get going in here. Let's talk about the overall modern productivity, right? What is this all about? Why are we caring about Office 365 Pro Plus versus the traditional Office? I mean, we've had Office in the market for decades now. And the key thing here is that we're starting to see a change in the way people are working with their productivity tools and coming up with new ways of actually being really productive and collaborating with their colleagues, whether they're within the organization or working with partners. And we're seeing that trend, evolve. And the problem with getting something like traditional Office is when you come to us and go, hey, we have this great new feature we'd love to implement within our organization. We take a look at it, we go, great, we love that idea. We go back to Redmond, we wallow around it, we go, okay, what's the best ways? What are the 20 different scenarios we could do? What are the possible corner cases? And we go through that process, and then we finally start coding. Great, we're already a year in after you gave us that feedback. Then we start, developing our test cases and going to alphas and betas and our different milestones as we release the product to the market. So now you have a new product in the market, about 3 years later from when you gave us that feedback. Well, that's great, but we all know you wait till SP1 to even start considering it. So we're talking about another year, 2 after that. And then once that's released, you're going to sit around and go, maybe it's time to look at it. Well, guess what? That's almost 10 years ago you gave us that feedback. And while your users are out there figuring out different ways of and acquiring applications, whether they're snackable apps or web-based apps, to actually get their job done. And that feedback was really great, but by the time you deploy it, there's something else newer that's coming out. So with Office 365 Pro Plus, we're able to change that. So whether you're actually grabbing, email or doing social collaboration, being able to just, save documents, whether it's on your local private cloud or the actual public cloud, right? At the center of it all is Office 365 Pro Plus. And with this product, we're able to quickly deliver new features and take your feedback and turn it around into real features in a much shorter period of time. In fact, I had a presentation yesterday, which unfortunately got published really late, so not many people showed up. But you can certainly check it out on online right now. I think it should be published by now. But it basically, there's a lot of enhancements coming to the overall deployment and update management for Office 365 Pro Plus. And I'll talk about some of that at the end of this session. But that was because we received feedback in November and December. And I'm taking that close to 10-year period of time and being able to shrink that down into anywhere between 6 to 8 months. And we're only getting faster. And to do that, we have to be able to deliver quality updates and be able to consume those in an easy-to-use fashion so you can have your users up and running. Now, we understand there's a whole bunch of other components involved when you're acquiring these new features. You obviously have to validate them, test them, make sure they work with your applications, because most of us are using Office as a platform as well as a productivity tool. So when you're using it as a platform, we have to be aware about all the add-ins and macros and everything else associated with that. So you could take that time to actually validate them, deploy it to your organization, and then you have to educate your users as to what those changes are going to be and how they can best utilize them so they could be a lot more productive. So let's then talk about the different ways of deploying Office 365 Pro Plus. Today, with the product, you have the ability to do a self-installation. You can go to the Office 365 portal, the user portal. You can go to your software section and just download the product directly from there. Your users can do that if you give them access to it. We also have the traditional managed deployments. I want to be able to have some of my users on a particular language with some of the applications, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, don't really want access, but the other group I do. I want to have different languages for a different set of folks. So we want to be able to manage that type of deployment and distribute that within my environment. We can use, what we call the Office Deployment Tool. I have a session on that tomorrow, which will go deep into that and talk about the different ways of configuring it. We can also use Microsoft Intune to deploy, where we would publish it into the catalog, and then your users can take it from there. Or, of course, System Center Configuration Manager. You can use deploying that or technically any software distribution tool. And then, of course, there's also another traditional way that we've always done this is already having it on the device with an image or using the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit and being able to deploy it that way. And again, tomorrow I'll talk a little bit more around that and what the best practice is for that, for using that. But today, we really want to focus on SCCM. So I keep getting this question. What's the definitive way to deploy ProPlus using SCCM? I'm hearing that from a lot of folks. So let's talk about that. What are the different ways to actually, get your updates? And we're going to go through this step by step to kind of understand how the device is actually deployed to. One, you can have the media bits available on the local drive, and you can just have it set up directly from there. Right? SCCM uses a great application mode that allows you to take the bits, distribution, put down into the SCCM cache, and then from there, you can actually just run the setup file and have it installed. The other way, of course, is through distribution points or a network share, DFS, having it all available there. So you can install it and have it streamed down to the actual desktop. And last, not least, is the cloud, right? Similar to the self-installation, we keep all the bits for every month that we build. We keep them up in our Office CDN, and you can just get the latest version or a particular version if you'd like, and be able to stream it directly from there and install it. The one nice thing about Office 365 Pro Plus is our overall installation technology. It's under the App V package model, and we've taken that, we've customized it for Office, and now when you start the streaming installation, it starts literally streaming. It starts loading up the most commonly used features first. So by the time I hit that 33% installation, I can actually start using my applications. You'll see it in the Start menu. You'll be able to start Word. You'll be able to start PowerPoint. And what it's doing, it's loading up the most commonly used features. So if I want to edit, have a particular, if I want to create a particular font or a document that I want to use, it'll load those up first. As it gets more complicated, it's going to ask you to wait a second as it finishes loading the rest of the features. And the overall installation time is a much faster thing than it has ever before. And if you're on the latest version, you know you're getting the latest set of bits, including all the security patches, all the feature updates, all the bug fixes. So let's talk about when to use each one of these. We have what we called from here. I want to deploy it from my actual desktop, right? This is great for initial deployments, especially if you're connected on the LAN, or if you're going to be disconnected at any point, you could certainly walk away with that. All the bits are located on your actual desktop. That's fantastic. Great for the SCCM application mode. Like I said, you're using the local cache, and then you can target that from a user perspective. If we do it from there, meaning distribution points from the actual network share, again, initial deployments, this is actually great for update management. And what I mean by update management is once you actually deploy the product, you want to be able to stream your updates. If you have a large enough pipe, directly from the cloud. If not, you want to control that within your environment. It's good to do it from a particular share. And the reason for that is because we integrate a particular technology, binary delta compression, which allows you to take the delta of what you have today and a delta of what's actually coming up from the next month's, or for that next month's update. On average, we're seeing about a 70% savings on that. And what do I really mean about that? If you look at the package, which I'll show you in our demo, the actual core package for Office is about 800 megs. And then every language that you add to it, you're adding about 200 megs. Think about it as like the language pack. So one language with the core is going to be a gig. If you have two languages, you're at 1,200 megs. So as you update from month to month, as I mentioned a little earlier, we rebuild Office every month and we deploy that out to our CDN. So if you have that 1 gig package, that means you're downloading that 1 gig every month. But it doesn't mean you need to distribute that 1 gig to your clients every month because of binary delta compression. Again, it gives you the ability to take the delta, the differences at the binary level between the new version and what you currently have right now. So that's why we want to be able to use that. And we'll talk about the best way of using that with SCCM and being able to use application mode versus programs and packages. And then there is the from anywhere. This is I want to be able to have, I have a workforce that is constantly traveling. They're either working from home, they're on the road, they're using their own DSL or internet connectivity, and they should be able to leverage that to acquire these updates or even the initial download. And you can target the version if you have a particular version that you like. There's no reason for them to come straight through your organization and then go out to the internet. Just doesn't make sense at that point. So let's look at what these configurations kind of look like. And we got to get into this to detail before we can actually see how SCCM is going to take advantage of these. Because the way we're leveraging SCCM today is we're using it as just any generic application. So we kind of have to do a little bit of tweaks with SCCM. Now, we are working really hard with the SCCM team, our colleagues over there, to ensure that as we evolve the overall product, and throughout the year, which we'll talk about a little later, we're going to be getting a lot more integrated with them. We'll be a lot more SCCM aware. And we'll talk about that shortly. So, as we talked about, we have this install from here, right? We're going to use the Office deployment tool to quick set up that exe file. We're going to deploy it just like any other piece of software, right? Where we're deploying the entire source onto the local disk, into the cache. It executes from there, and it's going to go ahead and install the actual full bits. Let's see what that actually looks like from a configuration file. So with the Office Deployment Toolkit, or Office Deployment Tool, sorry, ODT, you have the ability, you have a setup.exe file, 1 meg in size, about 800 KB actually, and then you have this 1 KB XML file. And what this tells me over here is that I want to be able to install Office Client Edition. I want 32-bit. That's what I'm going to be setting up. It's going to be Office 365 ProPlus, which in this case is going to include all of the different applications that we have, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, InfoPath, Link, OneDrive for Business, so on. I think we're about 10 now that's part of this. And if you choose to, if you want to exclude 1, 2, or a lot of them, you can certainly do that here. And again, I'll cover that in my session tomorrow, or using the Office Deployment Tool. And then what we're saying is we want to enable updates. And then we're going to say, don't display it to anybody. Go ahead and accept the EULA. Give us a little log. Let us know how things are going. And that's it. So again, we want to be able to deploy onto the desktop and by hosting all the source and the tool directly on the desktop and executing from there. If we're going to do it from there, what we're doing is we're going to separate that little setup.exe from the actual source bits. Source bits are going to be available directly on your share. And then the setup.exe, which is your 1 meg, so you're separating that 1 meg from that 1 gig initially. And what you're going to do then, let's go ahead and look at what the configuration looks like. Basically what this is saying is all we're doing is identifying the source path. When you identify the source path in the XML file, it just says, all my source bits are here. Go grab it from there. That's the only difference. Right? If I'm going to get it directly from the cloud, well, guess what? The configuration file for that is actually really similar to the first configuration file. It's identical. Because the way the Office Deployment Tool works, if it doesn't find the source bits on the local drive from where it's being executed from, it actually goes to the cloud. Now, this is only for initial deployment. It's not for updates. Because if you're controlling how your updates are going out to your organization, we certainly don't want it to revert back to the cloud and go, hey, give us the latest one, which is not certified by your organization. So we don't want to be able to do that. So this is just for initial updates, so keep that in mind. OK. So one thing you'll notice about using SCCM is that we need some kind of detection rule. And the detection rule is going to allow us to really identify whether or not Office was installed. With the traditional Microsoft installer, you can easily do that with SCCM. You can go, yeah, it's already installed. Not a big deal. I'm not going to rerun this based off my target users. With Office 365 ProPlus, there really isn't a concept of that at this moment. So we're going to need to add a detection rule. Best way we see right now is to just identify whether it's installed using the uninstall key within program features. So what we have here is this key, software, Microsoft, Windows, current version, uninstall, O365 ProPlus Retail, and we append the actual language. So if you have a different language that you're using, you'll also want to check for that. And then we're just looking for the value of a display name, right, if it's available. If it's there, great. You don't need to do anything. If it's not, then take action. That's essentially what we're telling SCCM. And then when it comes to update management, we can use packages and programs, to be able to either download the content directly from the DP or run from the DP. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's get right into some demos. So based off what I just told you, right, what we want to do is we want to do two different scenarios here. One, we want to focus, actually, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay, great. One, we want to focus on initial installation. We'll talk, we said we had a couple different ways of doing it. And then we're going to talk about just update management and how it's done today, and then what are the changes that are actually going to occur in the near future that we're trying to do with the integration of SCCM and Office 365 ProPlus. So, first thing we want to do here is we want to go into our software libraries. Of course, with SCCM 2012, we have the introduction of the application mode. With 2007, there's the legacy package. Kind of moving away from that in general, but it's actually pretty advantageous for us right now using for update management. So with the applications, let's go ahead and see what we have here, right? I have one application that I've already created. I'm going to create another one, but this is, I guess, a little cooking show demonstration where we see how it's actually made, and then voila, it's already done. So let's go ahead and create a new one, and I'll show you kind of what we have here. So one thing you're going to notice, when we start this wizard up, you're going to see that we have, what kind of type that we want. MSI's by default. As you scroll down here, you're not going to see anything for click to run, Office 365 Pro Plus. We just don't have that available at the moment. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to have to manually specify the application information. Again, this is the similar process that you would do to almost any other piece of software that's not totally SCCM aware as of yet. So what we're going to do here is we're going to manually specify that. We're going to add a name here, Office 365 Pro Plus. I can add any comments, publisher, obviously software versions. I'll call it 15 Microsoft. This is all optional. And then I think that everything else is good there. We can select language here if you prefer. And then I think we're good there. And now we come to deployment types. The great thing about deployment types here is you could say, hey, I need a package that focuses purely on set of my users where I just want Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook. I don't want the other set of applications. Or you're not ready to take advantage of OneDrive for Business. You don't want that in your organization. You can actually exclude that and target your users with that. And have some other users who have a different language, and you do want to enable that. Say maybe for your exec team who want to be able to try out the new set of cloud features, right? So you could certainly create the deployment types based on that. So if I said, let's go ahead and add a new deployment type, again, I'm going to have to manually add the deployment type information. We're going to call this O365 Pro Plus, and we'll say this is the English version. Add an extra character there. I guess I should have installed Zoom In on this thing first. So for the current location, what we want to be able to do is identify where the actual source is located. Let me show you what that looks like. So I have this folder called the Office CDN. It's a locally shared folder off of this for this particular demo. I have the Office files. I have my setup.exe, which is the Office deployment tool. We have all of these different XML files. And again, let me show you where kind of the data lives. We go under data. We have a couple of cap files. We have the version number here. And if you see, I have a whole bunch of more cap files available here. And then here's the actual set of bits that we have. 1,200 bits here, right? 1,200 megabytes of bits here. Basically, this is your core, which I talked about earlier. It's about 800 plus megs. And then we have two languages, one in English and one in French. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to use my XML file, and I'm picking the English language here, right? Specifying that as part of my source content. So what we want to do with the Office deployment, we want to say, add my actual source. And then I'm going to go down into what is the installation program that I want to be able to use, right? And the way you would do it with the Office deployment tool is setup.exe/configure. And then I'm going to specify the actual XML that it's going to execute. So it knows exactly what the source files are. It knows that it's going to go with the English language because I have two languages there. All I need is the XML file to tell me exactly how I want this configured or deployed. And we saw that's the basic deployment method, right? And we know it's going to be in English. We also have the ability to uninstall any of the programs, right? So say the actual device or that PC falls out of the management of SCCM, and you want to be able to remove the actual click to run or any of the Office 365 ProPlus components. So what I have here is another XML file. So setup.exe/configure, we're going to call it remove.xml. I believe that's what I called it. And if we go back over here into my share, we'll see remove.xml. I have a configuration that says remove all equals true. What that actually does, it removes everything out of click to run. So say, for example, you have full set of Office, you have Visio Online, Project Online, SharePoint Designer. All of those are 100% removed from that device. You can also specify that, no, I actually only want to remove Visio, or I want to remove just the just Office 365 ProPlus. And you can certainly do that through this configuration file by adding some more information here. So let's go ahead and close that. Once we do that, we're going to click on Next. And this is where we say add our detection rule, right? We talked about this. We want to go into a registry. We want to identify whether or not it has it. We're going to go to HT local machine. Let me actually cheat a little bit here and get that little reg key. There we go. And again, I want to identify. Oh, got to take that little slash out because that doesn't work. Value equals display name. And then my data type is string. And again, I can identify, if this was the French deployment, we'd have to identify the French language in there. And that's how you'd have to take care of that. We'll go ahead next. We're going to say install for a user or install for the system. Typically, you would say install for a user. But what it does not do for you, it only says install when the user's logged in. It kind of gives you that single option. You cannot have multiple users logging into Office 365 ProPlus on a non-shared computer device activated version of Office 365 ProPlus. I'll cover a lot more of that tomorrow, and I'll cover that in just a second of what that looks like. But for now, we're going to go for install for system, and then we're going to say whether or not the user is logged on. So if I don't want the user to be around when this installation is occurring, maybe it's off hours, they lock their desktop, or they walk away from it over the weekend, you can go ahead and do this deployment. And then there's the maximum time allowed to run. Typically about 5-7 minutes is what it takes. So I'm going to reduce this down to about, say, 20 minutes. If the actual installation hangs for any reason, after 20 minutes, it'll kill it, and you'll be able to then just get an error and then address it on a one-by-one basis, to see what exactly happened there. Go ahead and click Next, and then we can actually do requirements here. So we can say, I actually want to be able to, this is more of almost like a task sequencer, right? What kind of requirements do I actually need? Is there a particular add-in I need to have? Right? And the next tab beyond this is dependencies. What are the dependencies before I actually do this? Do I want to make sure I install an older version, like an MSI version? If I have Office 2003, 2007, 2010, we want to make sure you uninstall those if you're not going side by side. So you can use what I guess we call supersedence or task sequencer to be able to do tasks like that. Or again, if, like I mentioned earlier, if there's a particular add-in that you want to be able to distribute to a certain set of your users, you can certainly use this to be able to define that. So we're just going to go ahead and click through this. Next, and then there's my summary. And it's going to go ahead and set that up. Awesome. We got my little summary here. And that's it. And now it's setting up. So let's talk through what I have already had done before, right? We have this ProPlus after. I'm going to go open that up. And we're going to see on my deployment types, I have 3 deployment types available here. We have in English, we have French, and then we have SCA. And I'll tell you what that acronym means in a second. So again, just like the earlier example, I say I want English. I have an actual specific requirement here that I actually entered as well. It says, if the operating system's default language is English, I want you to get the English version, right? And if you look at what I have on the second one, similar thing. I have where's my content, what my installation. It's actually pointing to the office _ fr.xml file. From a requirement standpoint, I'm saying my operating system language, if its default is French, then that's what I want you to execute on. So it's using the basic detection methodologies to really understand what's on that device. And I can customize it any which way sort I can choose to. So let's go ahead and look at my actual XML for that. So we have the Office FR, the French one. Again, similar to the English one, the only difference is my language. I'm still using that same source package. So I'm not repeating that 800 megs core source that I would have to download and separate that out and deploy that. I'm actually using the shared core and only adding 200 megs beyond that for the actual language. And that's all I'm doing there. For SCA, which means shared computer activation, gives you the ability to actually turn that desktop into a shared device. So if I have multiple people logging in using a unique username and password, I can go ahead and leverage Office and not share any of its components from the other user, right? Like the roaming profiles and so on. It's also great for a VDI scenario, right? And in this case, what we've done here is we said, okay, content again, same. Nothing's changed from there. For my programs, I'm going after this office _ SCA.xml. And now let's take a look at that. And that XML file, the only thing that we have here different, it's, again, in English. I can add more languages if I want to. But all I'm adding here now is a property name equals shared computer licensing with a value of 1. That's all that needs to happen. It just enables that. Now, if you want to have more information around shared computer activation, different scenarios, we have several sessions that we're going to be focusing or talking a bit more around what that is. But just keep in mind, this enables you to do things like your Citrix deployments, your terminal services, and be able to do that shared desktop or virtual desktop so you can have multiple users log in and use that same copy of Office. So what we're doing differently here, though, is if you look at the requirements, I'm able to take advantage of another requirement which says, hey, if these desktops or computers are actually within this particular OU, in this case I have a VDI OU in my Active Directory, I can target all of those. So again, it's all about being able to target based off the requirements that you have within your organization, whether it's user-based or a specialty thing like this where it's based off my Active Directory attributes. Okay. So that's what we have available there. And then once that's completed, we can go ahead and start deploying it. And we can actually figure out the collections we want to go deploy it to. So I can target my users. I can target particular groups. If I had other different collections I wanted to create earlier, I can certainly start targeting them and going after it. Just go with all users, and I'll just continue through here. And then figure out, content destination. I mean, there's a lot of settings here, and if you're very familiar with SCCM, you can certainly be able to take full advantage of the different ways you deploy this. So now, that's what we talked about. What does it take to actually deploy from here, right? Again, it's taking all of your source files from that actual source path that we put in, that share. It's going to download it to your desktop into the CM cache folder, and then be able to execute it from that point onwards. Well, that really doesn't work well for updates, because if you do that from an update perspective, all you're going to see is that you have 1 gig, if you have one language, that's going to be consistently downloaded month after month after month. That's definitely going to saturate your network. It's going to annoy your users. It's just not going to be a good experience in general. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to take advantage of packages and programs. With packages and programs, it's a little different, right? The ability to update, there are a couple of different ways of seeing how you want to update. One, if you have automatic update turned on, which is by default turned on, it will look to the Office CDN, find the latest version, and go, yep, I see there's a version been published. We publish a new version every Patch Tuesday, and that's how you would get it. It would download just the deltas, right? We're using binary delta compression. Download it, install it, and you're good to go. Typically, depending on, if you have a fast internet connection, it's about a 3-minute process. We typically demo that, and I think you'll see a couple demos throughout the week. There'll be anywhere between that 2 to 3 minute time frame for update. So it's great. It's downloading approximately about 50, 60 megs, depending on the month and how much changes we've actually made. But as I mentioned, if you're using the application mode, that's going to download the entire gig and go from there. So now, what you can also do, the other option is turn off or keep automatic update on and point it to one of your local systems. But what that does is we have this almost like a heartbeat on the actual software that will go out and check that share. Is it there yet? Is it there yet? Is it there yet? If it's there, awesome, I'm going to grab it. But with SCCM, you want to be able to target. You want to be able to control when those updates are occurring. So the way we're going to do that is we have a file that we execute, or we created recently, an exe, called the Office C2R client.exe. And it enables us to then say, yep, I want to update, and gives me some parameters that I need to follow. And it's going to go ahead and update based off those parameters. And we'll see what that looks like. So the way we're going to do this is I've already created this one package, right? And I'll show you what that actually looks like. It's an empty package. So the first thing you're going to need to do is ensure that automatic update is turned off. And the way to do that is to go into group policy and make sure it's turned off. If you want to use the Office deployment tool, when you initially deployed, you can actually go ahead into the configuration file and say updates equals false. And that would turn it off at the initial install. But you can always go back into group policy and set that up later. So now, if we look at this, I have this program that I've already created. It's an empty package, essentially. All it's really doing is executing this update, this update file, the Office C2R client.exe, with a couple of parameters. We're going to the program files, Microsoft Office 15, client x64, Office C2R client.exe /update, users, and I'm going to target a particular version number that I want to go after. And the reason we're doing empty packages here and just executing this one file is because you want to take advantage of the binary delta compression, right? You're going to point it to the actual source. Oops. Come on. I'm getting click happy here. We're going to, oh, actually, it's not where I'm going to support it right here. I'll show you exactly where I'll set that up. But basically, we're going to execute this, and now let's go ahead and deploy it. So I'm going to target a particular collection. I created 3 different tiers over here. The way I've seen a lot of customers do it, and it's kind of our best practices now, is when you download a particular update, say, what are we in? We're in May. Say I'm approving the last month's version, and that's the one I validated through my organization, or I want to validate through my organization. I first download it, and I'll deploy it to my first set of users. Small, maybe 10, 15 folks. Let them go ahead, take a look at it, see how it's working. Everything goes great. Awesome. I'm going to push it out to a second set, which I call my Tier 2 guys. This is my app compat validation guys. These are folks within the organization that are using critical line of business applications day to day. And they've already been identified. They already know. They're consented to this, where they'll get the proper updates. They'll get a notification ahead of time. They'll get that update. They'll continue to do their day-to-day job. And if everything goes well, great. Then it moves on. If not, we can hit the big red button and stop the process, right? And then we can send it out to our Tier 1 guys, which is everybody else in the organization. So you can do as many tiers as you feel, right? Or actually, yeah. So the way we're going to do this for right now, send it out to my basic Tier 3. Right, for this demo, it's empty, so excuse that. We're going to go ahead. I'm going to select a distribution point. I already have one right now. We're going to say, is this installation required? Yep. Or is it going to be available? You can certainly choose. We're going to require it today. We're going to go ahead and schedule it at a particular time. And then we're going to show what the experience is going to look like. And then here is where I'm going to say where I want to run program from the distribution point or download the content from the distribution point and run it locally, right? I could certainly choose one of those. So we want to be able to run it from the distribution point, and then we're good to go. So that gives you a sense of what it takes to go from a basic deployment to an update management position, right? You can continuously target and update. Because once you get to a version of Office 365 Pro Plus, it's no longer about distributing initial deployments. Any new users come in, obviously they'll get new distributions. But for these existing users, it's always going to be update, update, update. So you can be, you can have the latest features and functionalities at any time, right? So let's talk about 2016. What's actually going to be coming around for, we announced the Office 2016. I had a blog post back about a month ago that talked about some of these features that were going to be coming out to make life a lot easier. Because we know that as much as we'd love for you guys to be hands-off on Office deployments and updates, that's not going to be realistic, especially when you're using Office as a platform. So we want to be able to help out, and we got a lot of feedback. This is feedback that we received at the end of last year. And like I mentioned, because of the new software cycle that we have, we can easily turn around and be able to deliver this faster than ever before. So what is the first thing that we're going to be able to do? One is we're introducing a concept called deferred updates. It actually reduces the number of features that you can consume at any one time. And what do I mean by that? It means today, if you look at how we deploy features, it's features, bug fixes, and security patches. We deploy that or create a package and deploy that out on a monthly basis, right? Let me show you what that looks like. So every month we create a brand new package. If you're using one language, you're going to get 1 gig for that. That's the current way we do it, and we're going to continue to do that. So those of you who aren't using Office as a platform and want to be on the latest and greatest, this is the method you would continue to take. The other method, which we're talking about, were the deferred branch, where we now give you the builds 3 times a month with features and bug fixes. So we'll consolidate a lot of those, and we'll add it into this deferred branch. As I mentioned, you get 3, as you see in this timeline, right? Give you a whole bunch of features on January under DB1, in May for DB2, and then September DB3. Those aren't the real dates, just to caveat that. But just to help you illustrate exactly what that looks like. No more than 3 times will you get all that. Now, in addition to that, we're going to, of course, continue to provide security updates as needed, right? Like, we're not going to compromise on security. So we're going to continue to provide builds along the way with just security. No features, no bug fixes. That's where we're going to go with. And if you have auto update turned on, you would then go to the next branch, right? You'd stay on it for about 4 months. You'd get a whole bunch of new features at your next one. So if you're on DB1, DB2 would have a new set of features. Now this gives you a good enough, hopefully good enough time to actually see the build, validate it, see what's going on, and then be able to deploy it if you're not willing to go month to month to month, which I could totally understand why. If you turn off auto update and go, no, I actually need to be on this build for a little longer, we'll continue to service it for another 4 months. So what does that mean? It means come August, right, you now have a choice for your September build. You can either go to DB2 with the additional security fixes that have come out since then, or you can jump directly to DB3. So we'll expose 2 branches at a time and overlap them, as you can see in this illustration. Same thing with DB3. When DB3 comes out, you have the first 4 months. We'll extend it for another 4 months. Then you have a decision to go to DB4, DB5, and so on. And once that build is done after that 8-month period, it's no longer supported because we now have these new ones. What we're doing to help that, to give you guys even further awareness, is the ability to get that preview of that build 4 months beforehand. So we're going to stabilize that build 4 months ahead of time. We're going to have you have access to it. And if we did break anything, we're going to fix that break. And you'll see what that looks like. So you'll have 4 months to validate that. Then you can adopt it. Say you adopted it, say January, we released the validation build. You'll have 4 months to actually take a look at it. We'll make any slight changes necessary to make sure it's really stable. And then come in May, if you decide to adopt it then, you can certainly pick that up and then continue on for another 8 months if you prefer. Now, how are we going to be able to get this fast and be able to deliver this and for us to be able to, take the actual feedback and turn it around? So the way I want to give you guys some insight of the way we actually do it today. When we get feedback from you guys, we go ahead, figure it out. We understand, we figure out the different scenarios that are necessary. We go and start coding, and we start building these and start sending it out to our early adopters. Now, this is a combination of Microsoft internal folks, our whole different set of teams that we have, all of actually Microsoft, and then it goes out to a lot of the early adopters that signed up for early adopter programs that we currently have available. This starts out at a really small group, goes up to tens of millions of users. So all of these guys are able to quickly flight these builds before it even goes out. By having the masses being able to help us out here, we can quickly take feedback into the organization as to, what's broken, what do we need to address, and then before we actually ship it out. We're going to ship it out to the current branch. And those are the guys who are going to be hundreds of millions and be able to take a look at that. And that's kind of where that 4-month clock starts for us. We'll send them a build. We snap another build for you guys under the validation, and we'll hold that. And as we get feedback over the next 4 months, if there's any breaking fixes that we have to address, we're certainly going to do that. And then you would go ahead and get that, you would take the advantage of the deferred branch beyond that. So that obviously changes a lot on how we're going to, use SCCM, because everything I just talked about, packages and programs and being able to use the application mode, that kind of changes things a little bit. So the other thing that we did talk about in that blog about a month ago was the better integration with SCCM. What does that really mean? It means we're going to start being SCCM aware. SCCM can start taking over Office and saying, hey, this is what I want you to do, and do it right. Understand what my maintenance windows are. Run it at this maximum time. I mean, it kind of does that already to a point, but not well integrated as it could be. I want you to be properly aware of my distribution points. The demo that I showed you, one of the flaws that it had there was saying, hey, this is my static distribution point. What happens if I travel from Chicago to Tokyo? That's a problem. Do I got to go back to Chicago, DP, to actually get my updates? Not so much fun, right? You're going to have your network guys coming down and screaming at you. We don't want that. So we're going to make it a lot more DP aware. You can be able to have, it's going to help you find it, to find your nearest DP, and then be able to access it from there. So we're doing a lot of work with our colleagues in SCCM to ensure this is going to happen. If we look at kind of version numbers, right, we have the vNext. I think they announced it for SCCM 2016. We're going to be doing a lot of integration work there. We are looking at better ways of integrating with the current 2012 version. And then with 2007, unfortunately, it's something that we just aren't investing in. So as you can see, there are a couple asterisks there for 2012. So we're still investigating on, like I said, better ways of dealing with distribution points. I think we're fairly close to coming up, but once we get a good solution, just keep an eye out on the blogs, and we'll be adding some more information around that. And then we have things like WSUS notifications, right? Those of you who are using WSUS for Windows updates, you know life's much easier on that path. So we're looking at better ways of integrating there, at least publishing our manifest. We're not going to be dumping our bits in there. That just doesn't make sense. So we will certainly we'll be looking at putting our manifest, and this way you can have a better notification for WSUS when you're leveraging WSUS. And then you can see we're kind of saying no to packages and programs. It's not going to be necessary at that point when you're working through this. So that being said, we have a whole bunch of resources. A couple of things here to check out, right? We have the updates. Is that enough updates? Session coming up. It's a deep dive session, so go ahead and check that out. We also have one about the Office deployment tool, which is going to be tomorrow. And then we have the mixing it up. So if you are going to be doing coexistent work between your existing Office as well as Office 365 Pro Plus, that's certainly a something that you can certainly do. So we'll talk about the pros and cons around that, and then telemetry dashboard, and then overall demystifying deployments. I put in 2 web resources. Talks about the step-by-step for setting up packages and programs using SCCM, and then looking at more information around the Office C2R client.exe. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to leave the rest of the time for Q&A, and please do your evaluations. It's really useful for us. And thank you very much.